Well, it took a while, but we eventually managed to update the damn deck. Oh my god. Finally got the promo cards. Yeah. Hi guys, Guardian205 here. Yeah. So as anyone is aware, I have been in promo hell for the longest time. And yeah, as you just saw, I've managed to get my promos eventually. Managed to find some sellers, and before I forget, massive shout out to my friend Cami, because he was able to actually find the Cordielas listed on Card Market at some point, and they went pretty fast. I don't know if there's any still there or not, but yeah, I managed to pick those up, and then at the same time, I was also then later able to find a seller for the Emmylines as well, which was very fortunate, shall I say. So yeah, you fortunately had a playset of them going for a lot cheaper than what they started out as. So yeah, but yeah, we have a Majesty Lord Blaster deck update for you guys. Super happy. You know, frustrations aside, I'm really happy with the deck right now. The deck is super fun to play. Yes, it's still not like a high contender deck, but doesn't have to be. As long as it's fun, as long as it's enjoyable, that's fine with me. And yeah, the deck is definitely fun and enjoyable. Let me say that. So to start with the right deck, let's get into things. So we are of course playing the Wingle Brave, the Little Sage Merrent, the Blaster Blade, and of course MLB. So sticking with the Blade. Now I will say this: we need to go over Cordiela. So she's very particular in how this deck is designed. So it says, whilst it's in your back row center rearguard circle, and your Vanguard's Majesty Lord Blaster, she gets two effects. The first is at the end of the battle that she boosted, you can counterblast one, choose up to one Blaster Blade and one Blaster Dark, each from your soul, and you call them to the rearguard circle in the same column. So I spoke to a friend of mine, and we both seem to agree that you are allowed to call one of the blasters, and you don't have to call both of them because of this phrase here: choose up to one Blaster Blade and one Blaster Dark. So you don't have to pick any of either on. You can pick one Blade and zero Dark, one Dark and zero Blade, or one of each of them. So yeah, and then basically the stipulation of like calling them to the same column is in case you call both of them. That's the way I'm trying to say it. Now, if I'm incorrect, do tell me in the comments. I did try to email Busherud about this, and I tried to research it beforehand, but couldn't find anything to say otherwise, but that is what I believe how it works. So, yeah, but either way, the multi-attack that it provides is still great. And then the second skill is if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, all of your grade 2s can boost, which is also fantastic. It fixes an issue that we had going second, which was our Blaster Dark not being able to connect unless we got the 5k power on it, or unless we boosted it somehow. So yeah, so Cordiela really changes the deck up, and it actually makes the Blade questionable. Now, the reason I like Blade still is because you still want to get Dark with Merrent, and you know, check on the top 7 to get the Dark. And then Blade then provides you either a spot removal or a draw. So you get 2 cards from the Merrent and Blade interaction, or you get 1 card with a spot retire, which is pretty nice. Now Blaster Dark. Blaster Dark is also decent because there are times where sometimes the Blade counterblast isn't always used, because if your opponent has a rearguard that's not worth retiring, it actually might be worth not counterblasting for the Blade and instead using something else. Which, in that line, sometimes using the Dark can actually be that bit more flexible to where you can like look for the Blade with the Merrent, and then if you don't add it, you can at least call the Wingle, then retire it with Dark to then get a Twin Drive on your turn 2, which is pretty decent. It's good aggro, and it's also 2 cards deeper into the deck to help you give like an extra reassurance, basically, that you're digging for that Blaster Blade. So if you wanted to play Dark in the right deck, you could, but I don't think there's an incorrect choice here. I think both of them have their merits. And of course, the other one will have value in the main deck that the other won't. So the line of play with Dark, though, with the Cordiela, is that if you find another copy of Dark, like let's say you have one in the right deck, right? You're looking for a Blade and a Dark at this point, so that when you put Dark into the Soul along with Blade, you'll have a spare Dark that you can call out with Cordiela, and then you can attack with that. And because it can gain that 5k power, it could get over a magic number threshold that like Blaster Blade couldn't. So that's the line of play I'm kind of thinking here. But it also kind of, it's very if and are really, because you then also have to think, well, that's probably only been more beneficial if you've got a booster behind the Blaster or if you've got a Persona Right turn. So I don't know. And also, I kind of like Dark in the main deck just because it provides MLB an extra drive check. So I think that's a bit more valuable, really, than having the full main deck Blade. So, yeah, whoops. So, have to go over that a bit because, yeah, the dimensions that Cordiela adds to the deck really dictates what you do with the right deck and also the main deck. So, yeah. So, without further ado, we'll move on over to the main deck now. So, of course, we have the 3 additional copies of MLB, and we also play the one Gradle, basically just to help us with power. The deck doesn't generate a lot of it outside of like Persona Riding or the Emmeline promo, because she also is able to gain power whenever a Blaster attacks, which scales really, really nicely. So the Gradle is, I would say, flexible enough to where you could consider playing something else. I play it just to have that reassurance that I'll always have a power generator in the late stages of the game, because MLB is actually quite a tanky deck, because since you're a 15k base, it's actually a bit more difficult for the opponent to kill you. So this deck can actually last quite long. So having that extra element of power can actually be quite handy in the late game. So yeah. But consistency-wise, the deck is tenfold better because we can now search for the Persona Ride with our Emmeline, which is fantastic. So yeah. So that is it for the grade 3s. So going into the grade 2s, we of course have the 4 copies of Blaster Dark. Yeah. Oh, he just looks so nice in SP, dude. Yeah, the one of my goals this year was to get the encounter stuff in SP, and I suppose along with him, just to show both of the boys off, we have the 3 Blaster Blade looking sparkly as ever. But yeah, we do want to be maximizing on both of them because you need to make sure you've got a spare copy of at least one of the blasters in your soul after your MLB attack, so that you can call one of them or both of them from your soul for the multi-attack that your Cordiela brings you. So it is important to play the multiples. Also, the element of Blade being able to retire is quite nice because it gives the deck a bit more board control, because you can kill with his Counterblast, and then you can also put him into the soul with MLB to then get another retire, which is pretty cool. And like I was talking about before, Dark, although his Counterblast does require you to kill something, we actually play some cards in the deck that are able to, act as like retire fodder, which will make more sense later. But yeah, Dark is able to snipe anything, and also getting that 5k really helps you when creating columns again, because if you say call both of your blasters out with your Cordiela, what I like to do is put like Blade in the front row and Dark in the back, so that if this is boosting, it's a 15k booster for the Blade to make it 25, so it gets over a defensive, but then also you're holding on to that Dark for your follow-up turn, so if the Blade does die, you've got Dark there so that you can still gain that additional drive check for the follow-up turn, which is really, really nice. And also, I think this is one of the sickening parts with Cordiela as well, is that before, with MLB, you have to give up both of these to get a benefit. So you got rid of 2 cards, but in exchange for that, you got a drive check, so you got a card back in hand, and then you got a retire. So you kind of did like a 1-for-1 exchange there. But your Cordiela actually brings these back out for a CB, which means you're actually turning those 2 card exchanges into a +2 overall in terms of card economy, which is insane when you think about it. But yeah. But anyway, that is enough talking about the blasters. Yeah, they're good. Yeah, in a blaster deck, who would have thought? So that is it for the blasters. So we'll go over our honorary blaster, which I'm so happy to own. Oh my god, we have 4 copies of Emmeline. Emmeline is just everything. Yeah, this card's great. So when placed from hand, you can Soul Blast 1, look at the top 5 cards of your deck for a blaster, either call it to a Regard circle, or add it to hand. If you add it to hand, you have to discard a card. So basically, if you're fetching for Persona Rides, you have to discard a card, basically. But the thing that takes us to the moon, besides from the consistency element of it, is the fact that the second skill says whenever your blaster unit attacks, it gains 5k, and it's not once per turn. So because we can multi-attack now with the Cordiela in our blasters, we can now get this to 25k on its own. That's without Persona Ride power, that's without boosting. So usually this can get to 43k plus sometimes. And one of the disgusting things about this occasionally is because we can boost with grade 2s because of Cordiela, we can sometimes create a column that looks like this. And then this gets pretty out of hand. You're looking at 60k plus sometimes, depending on if you get triggers. And my god, it's great. If your opponent's dwindling on hand size and you're swinging a 60k plus column at them, that's a lot. But yeah, like I said, the fact that the power is just so helpful. We can boost with these now because of Cordiela, and the filtering that it provides the deck to get to your blasters, get to your Persona Rides. It's fantastic, and it's a Soul Blast as well. Dude, we counterblast for the Blade and the Ride deck. We counterblast for a couple of other things. This is fantastic. I could keep going on about Emmeline, but we'll move on. But yeah, Emmeline, good card. So the next grade 2 we're playing is 2 copies of the order card that came out of set 8, I believe this came in. Yeah, set 8. This is the Wisdom of Beginning. So this is basically a counterblast 1 to draw 2. But you then have to reveal 2 cards, and then if those units have grade equal or less to your van, you call them. If they don't, you discard them. So you're basically incentivized to, gain a plus through making a board, essentially. But the element about this that I love is the fact that you're drawing 2 cards deeper into the deck, which means you're fetching for pieces like the Emmeline, which could then help you get to your Darks or your MLBs or whatever. So yeah, it basically helps you dig into the deck to see the important pieces that you're looking for. So I quite like that. So with that being said, what are some of the cards that we might be trying to dig for besides from the obvious pieces? Well, one of those cards could be Turnar, for example. Turnar is basically a countercharger. So after the battle that it's boosted, you can, if you have 3 or more damage that are face down, you put this into your soul and you countercharge. Now this is important because your Cordiela actually needs a CB for you to get that multi-attack. So having the enabler to get that countercharge so that you can get the multi-attack is very flexible, because it means that you can get away with using other counterblast effects in the deck, like your order or your blasters or whatever. So that's pretty nice. It's also nice as well because when it comes to the early game, depending on if we use the Blaster Blade skill or not, because sometimes this isn't actually great if the opponent has a unit that's not worth retiring. Let's say Rorora, for example, with their plant tokens. I don't want to retire one of them. So instead of using a CB for Blade, I might use it for this order, for example. And then when it comes to the late stages of the game, depending on how much counterblast I've used for which effects, the Turnars will basically just be that enabler to help me, secure that one counterblast that I need for the Cordiela, basically. So yeah, but I felt 2 copies of this was fine because I tested 3 and it felt a bit too heavy. You need to have that 3 damage, so it's pretty much going to be the late stages of the game, basically. So yeah. But then the last grade 2 that I'm playing is the 1 copy of Maple. This is fantastic because it's just free card advantage that you can generate just by riding. And the really funny thing with it is there was a particular unit in this deck that really likes Maple. Yeah. We just eat this all the time with Dark. Well, usually, because we can just either retire it, get the retire off, get the 5k power, even sometimes calling over it can sometimes be optimal. So it really depends on what your setup is. But yeah, Maple just keeps coming back. It's just free card advantage, and we like that. So there you go. So that is it for the grade 2s. So we'll move on over to the grade 1s. So we can quickly go by this since I've already discussed it at the beginning of the video. We, of course, have our 4 copies of Cordiela, the multi-attack enabler, which is fantastic. Yeah, one thing I will say with this, besides from the skill, because we already went over it, do be careful with these because you cannot search them. We have to draw into them or dig for them, and yeah, if you're going against like a board control deck, try and use these sparingly, or at least like wait until you have like a spare copy left over so that you can have it for the follow-up turn. But yeah, I mean, I don't need to say too much about it. Grade 2s can boost, enables multi-attack. It's fantastic. So the other spaces for grade 1s is quite interesting. You could look at these as like flex slots. I play 1 copy of the grade 1 Maple and then 1 copy of the Sarkab grade 1 from the Dragon Tree line. So I play the Maple obviously because again, like the grade 2, it just keeps coming back. Free card advantage, Blaster Dark can use it. And the reason I like playing this with the Sarkab is because usually in this deck, because we have a spare back row rearguard slot open usually, because usually with the deck we have this occupying the Vanguard rearguard circle at the back. The 2 circles on the left are usually like the blasters usually. So we have a spare circle back here that's basically for utility or whatever you want to do, like the 2 Emmeline play, for example, or whatever. But these are also nice because you could say for Sarkab, you could call this down early with your Emmeline to not only get a top 5 filter for a blaster, but then later then draw a card. So it's like super filtering. But then also it's an 8k booster and an actual body that you can put on the board. Because before I was testing the deck with like 3 copies of this draw order, but I decided to swap the 3rd copy out for a Sarkab just because the boosting element of him and the plussing element there is still there. So I felt like the utility of him would be a bit nicer to have instead of bricking on like multiple orders on my hand, basically. So far it's been working out quite nice. It's just the 1 of tech, so you could exchange these for some other cards. So some things I thought of was like Painkiller Angel, because Painkiller retires itself, so it then gives Blaster Dark the 5k power for the turn. And then it also refills hand as well. But you'll have to just bear in mind that it does cost Soul Blast, so do bear that in mind. And then the other choice I thought of was like Blaster Javelin, because it's another blaster that you can call out with Emmeline. And then also in the early game, Javelin could then enable you to do a bit more of a heavy rush turn. And with it being a 10k booster as well, could maybe help you get over a defensive depending on who goes first and second. So yeah. Also, if you ever attack with Javelin, it's a blaster that's attacking, so Emmeline will get 5k. So that's another thing. But I quite like these 2 grade 1s because they generate card advantage within themselves. So I kind of value it a bit higher. But yeah, have a play around with these 2 slots with other cards and other choices that you can think of. But it's nice overall. So that is them. And then, of course, the final grade 1s of the deck are the obvious ones, being the Perfect Guards with the 1 Blitz Order and the 3 regular Perfect Guard. So yeah, nothing too much to go over there. So that is it for the grade 1s. So moving on over to the triggers, we of course are playing the Over Trigger, sticking with the Keta one for the time being. The really nice thing now with the Keta one is because we're calling the Darks out after our drive checks usually, we know if we can actually activate Dark's skill to then enable him to get the drive check on the rear guard, which is pretty funny. It doesn't happen all the time, but it could come up, and it's nice that we can actually line that up now with the Over Trigger if we see it through the drive checks, so that's cool. I will say in future though, we might end up replacing this for the new one in the Festival Collection, the one that's like the Fire Earth looking one, the one that's like it's kind of like a pseudo stand trigger in a way, but yeah, that one's pretty good. So I don't know whether or not it'll outclass this or not, but yeah, you can play this for the time being, and then there's also the 100 million, times 2 Over Trigger from the start decks, so you can try that as well. But yeah, Keta Over Trigger, it is what it is. And then we also have the regular triggers in the 4 crit, and we're also playing the 4 more crit. Now, instantly, you're probably wondering where the effect trigger is. I'm not playing it, because the only card in the deck that's Soul Blast is Emmeline, and it's only 4, so and also you generate like passive soul charge anyway with like the persona rides, the counter charge with Turner, the multiple blasters you might put in. So we don't really need the extra soul, so the vanillas I think are just fine. And also, honestly, I kind of like the light and dark contrast of these triggers as well. Kind of fits the theme, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, but yeah, the 5k element of them, the 5k power on them is quite nice. It can come up sometimes in like really clutch scenarios, but yeah, doesn't make much of a difference. But I think I prefer these over the effect ones. Effect trigger though wise, we are still playing the draws, because this deck is super piece reliant, and I just like playing draw triggers, honestly. I think they're great. I was considering front triggers at one point for the 20k shield, but yeah, I'm kind of stuck on the draws for now. But we'll see, we'll see. And then the last trigger, of course, is the 4 heal. Yeah, adapt these to your meta, like I always like to say. I think at the moment, in terms of ones that are being played, it's the one where it's like, if your opponent's Vanguard's a higher grade, it's a 20k shield instead of 10. And then there's the other one that's being played where it's like, if your opponent's unit has an additional crit outside of, you know, a trigger, it becomes a 25k shield instead of 10. So I think those are the two that are being played right now. But if you're like me and you just like sticking to the vanillas, that is also fine. So yeah, that is it for the triggers, and that is it for the deck, honestly. So yeah, I mean, there's honestly not much else I can say about this deck. It is fun as anything. Like, it's actually kind of sad in a way, how much these promo cards just changed the deck completely. Trying to find Emily in here. Where is she? There she is. Yeah, it's actually crazy how much these two cards just changed the dynamic of the deck overall. But it's great. Like, I love it. Of course, in a bit of a biased position now because I actually have the promos now. But please, 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 Bushy Road, reprint these, make them more accessible, because I can only imagine other MLB fans out there are dying for these, and I don't blame them. They're fantastic. So please make these easier to get. But yeah, that's basically the deck. So I hope you guys liked it. Deck log will be in description as always. And yeah, a bit of a long one today, but I always like to go super in depth with like my blaster decks. So yeah. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. This is Guardian 205, signing out.